Okay, so welcome to my sort of director's cut of my 2-minute monologue performance where I am playing Reecey from the musical Our House, written by Tim Firth. Tim Firth is a playwright. He has written musicals such as Calendar Girls, Kinky Boots, and of course Our House, which is where this extract is from. And now I'm going to talk about why I picked it. Firstly, I picked this monologue from this musical simply because I love the musical itself. I love the music. The music is from the band Madness. I mean, I also love the character Reecey. I feel like there's so much I can explore with that character. Reecey is such an interesting character because he is a lovable rogue bad guy. You either love him or hate him. Throughout the musical, he's funny, he's comical. He also keeps the energy going throughout the show, but also there's something about him which is just pure evil. I wanted to convey him just as that sort of lovable rogue bad guy. He has some lines in there which is funny. And I did that by contrasting the tones of my voice to tell, like, you can either love him or hate him. He's dark in some points, but in other points he's humorous, which we'll see later on when he talks about there's plenty more fish in the sea. But I also wanted to show through my facial expressions, which again you will see later on, how he's trying to really convince Joe. He's trying to make Joe feel bad, especially when he talks about having enough money to get a job and, all those sort of things. So we're going to let this play out, and as we go on, we're going to talk about many more things, including the character, in more depth, the location, the props, the accent, etc. Well. Okay, so sorry to stop it so soon in. However, I just need to quickly talk about the camera angle I used for this monologue. So this camera angle is used as a point of view from Joe's perspective, looking at Reecey. As the monologue begins, the camera pans from the drink across to Reecey as if he's just spotted him, and it follows him as he sits down at the table. It then remains fixed, looking at Reecey throughout the monologue, as if Reecey is talking to him and giving him eye contact as if it's a one-on-one conversation. Okay, so just a bit of context for you all. Joe Casey is the character that Reecey, my character, is trying to talk to, and he's trying to convince Joe that he should join his business, and he's just spotted him in the bar and he's decided to walk over and talk to him. The reason he's so keen on him trying to join his illegal business is because he wants Joe, and he's heard that Joe has broken into a building previously, and he knows that that is perfect for what he wants to do. When we see Reecey talking to Joe, the camera stays at a medium shot looking at Reecey. However, I didn't want it to be still. I wanted it to move slightly, almost to replicate Joe's head moving, as if it was literally we were watching it through someone else's eyes. Look who it is. Joe Casey. Okay, so the first thing we're going to be talking about is the accent. So as you just heard, I came in there and I am portraying a Cockney London accent. Okay, so the reason I portrayed a Cockney accent is because I wanted to replicate that the monologue and character is based in Camden area, which is near Camden Lock, as that is where Our House is based. I practiced this by lowering the pitch of my voice, and I made it sound gritty, showing Reecey's rough background. I watched videos on YouTube on how to do it, and I already had practice doing it because I've acted with a Cockney accent for multiple roles before. To make sure that I perfected this, I kept repeating the same process and repeating the lines in the mirror, which I have at university, and it just really gave me a feel of how that character sounds. Probably not the best place to stop the monologue there. I don't exactly look my best. But anyway, we move on. Now we're going to be talking about the props and the costume. In terms of costume, I wore a silver watch, showing Reecey likes expensive things, but it also makes the audience question, how could he afford it? We can tell Reecey isn't the most upper class person in the world. In fact, he sounds very lower class due to his accent. So it makes the audience question, how did he afford it? Was it through doing work, from earning money in the right way? Or was it from doing illegal things such as stealing or doing illegal business, etc.? I also wore Nike Air Forces, which is a typical modern sort of roadman sort of shoe, as I wanted to give the monologue a modern feel. Even though it's set in the 80s, I wanted to bring this forward and set it to where we are now in time. I wore black jogging bottoms and a black hoodie, conveying a sort of rogue man-like persona through his outfit, as that's what sort of modern-day thugs sort of use. I had my hair pushed down, and I asked my barber for a skin fade with a line on the side of my face to show that this character is somewhat edgy and it gives it a criminal-like feel. Later on, throughout the sort of cutscenes, which I will talk about later, you'll see the use of a padded coat, and it shows a different character. So obviously I don't wear that, but another character does later on in the cutscenes. And it also shows the sense of criminal activity in the area, as that that is what most roadmen wear. And now moving on to the prop side of things, as you can see, I use 2 pints. I have one either side of the table, and they're both in shot. But as you can see, I do actually drink mine. I use that because this is a conversation between Reecey and Joe, and by using 2 pints and having them on either side of the table, the audience can understand that someone else is actually stood behind the camera and we're watching it from the camera's perspective, as if it's a point of view shot. Don't cry over spilt women, mate. I mean, there's plenty more fish in the sea. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to talk about my performance so far. So obviously we can see that Reecey's a big character. We can tell that by the way he enters. He's very open, he's loud, he's confident. You can sort of get a real gist of what his character is like as soon as he sits down. He's very energetic and we sort of take a liking to him at the start. And then we sort of see that Reecey lowers the tone of his voice as he starts noticing that Joe is upset, and then he mentions about, oh, don't cry over spilt women, as he can see that Joe is upset. So I lowered the tone of my voice there to show that Reecey does care. However, then I wanted to contrast that by showing Reecey's joking side, and I did this. Here. You're likely to get something after your tackle. Okay, so now I thought it would be a good time to be talking about the location. So, as you can see, this is a booth in a pub, and I think it was perfect. It was actually a Wetherspoons in Cardiff. I love this booth because it was a private place. It shows that this is a private conversation between 2 people, Joe and Reecey. And I also like the shaded lighting around the scene because it makes the scene appear more mysterious, dark and private, giving the audience the impression that they want to know more. They want to understand what this conversation is about and where it might lead to. Billy and Angie said, you got into one of them new flats up Camden Keys. Very impressive. Okay, so what you just saw there was a transition from a previous event that happened in Joe's life. And as we can see, we have a still shot of Joe moving towards a door, and it's cutting to a mid shot of him trying to break in, and we hear the sound effect of the door being rattled, just emphasising that Joe is actually breaking into that building, linking to what Reecey is saying. Above the video, I added a hazy filter effect, which was used to show that we're in another place, as it's a flashback. And I also used a swoosh sound effect separating the time zones for the audience, making it clear that we're in a new place. In terms of location, when we see Joe crossing the road to get to the building, it's actually filmed outside my accommodation building. The reason I chose it was because it looks worn down out of respect, and it looks out of the way from other places. It's a building on its own, so it was a suitable location for Joe to break in. After we cut back, after the swoosh sound effect appears again, we see that Reecey says, very impressive, and I wanted to make sure that I put that shot in there because I wanted the audience to be able to see Reecey's facial expressions, realising that he might be onto something here. He might be able to recruit Joe and convince him after he's heard about this break-in. Have you ever thought about the future, Joby? I mean, sure, you could do your exams. Alternatively, you could come and work with me. Okay, so as you just saw then, we had another flashback hazy effect, followed by the swooshing sound effect, showing that we have yet another flashback. So here I decided to use a tracking shot following the character of Joe running away with a police siren sound effect to show that he was nearly caught. This heightens the suspense and risk, and it makes the audience question what actually happened to Joe, and hence why he's sat in the bar with Reecey as we speak now. As it cuts back to me performing the character of Reecey, to show that he's really trying to convince Joe, he has a light grin on his face, which I show through my facial expressions, showing that he really does want Joe to join and he wants him to forget about his exams. As it happens, I'm starting up a little business venture. As you just saw, when Reecey sort of lowers the dynamics of his voice, turning it into a sort of whisper, I used my physical expression through a hand gesture, directing the camera to come towards me, and this was a more personal moment and discreet chat. The camera moved up to a close-up, and it made the audience see that the chat is more private. When I say the line business venture, you can see I sort of slow down and take my time with that line, and I use my physical and facial expressions to grin, showing the audience Reecey's intentions aren't necessarily good. He's smirking and looking evil for a reason. Here, we're men of 16 now, mate. Everything's legal. You've seen what them penthouses are like out there, Joe. This shot was actually filmed in the streets of Cardiff, and it actually is a penthouse. It has a penthouse at the top, and it relates to what's being said in the text. In terms of camera angles for this shot, the camera pans up towards the penthouse, and it emphasises on the building's expense, power and height, which is something that both Joe and Reecey are striving to achieve. But the next time you walk into one, own it. No one ever made money by working for someone else, Joe Casey. And if I were you, I'd forget your exams, and I'd tell myself that as of today, school's out. Okay, so there's a few things about the camera angles and the sound effects that I really want to talk about here quickly. Firstly, I want to talk about the naturalistic sounds that we hear from the pub. I decided to keep them in simply because it creates and it gives the audience a sense of what the pub is like. It's naturalistic. And also, I want to talk about the bell sound effect, which can be heard after I say school's out. And it shows the audience that Reecey is thinking about school, so it links the monologue to school. However, this is also a typical sound that you may also hear in a bar. In terms of performance for this certain section, I really wanted to slow down what Reecey was saying, showing that Reecey's really thinking about what he's saying, trying to convince Joe. So, for example, when he says, Joe Casey, as soon as he says that, he stops. I pulled my body back, giving me time to think about what Reecey was going to say next. I also used my hand gestures, and I really emphasised as of today, and I pointed down on the table to show that he wants Joe to work with him, and he's a hard-hitting businessman. That is who Reecey is. He's a cheeky chappy. He's someone who's a criminal. He wants it, he gets it. So he really wants to emphasise the knocking down on the table. Oh, I mean, don't turn me away, Jojo. It's just a little job. Okay, so here I raise the pitch of my voice to make Reecey sound patronising, to show Joe that it's not a big deal, or trying to convince him at least that it's not a big deal, it's just a little job, when really it's a big job which could get Joe in prison. I also use my hands and I put them out on the table to show that Reecey's trying to convince him it's not a big deal. He's trying to lay all the cards on the table, when in reality he's not telling Joe the full truth. I also widen my eyes, really trying to get it across that Reecey really does want Joe to join on this illegal business that he's planning, and it just makes it more personal. It just really looks at the audience and makes the audience think about what they'd be like in Joe's position. I've got it planned all nice and convenient. Slightly open front window, and on your way home from work as well. Okay, so as you just saw, I literally took a close-up of a smashed window, and I took long shots of a street with a smashed window in it, basically just to emphasise and link it with the dialogue, the slightly open front window. And it also creates a sort of criminal sort of like feel to the monologue, as that is what Reecey is talking about. I added a smashed glass sound effect to show that maybe Joe has broken windows before, and maybe to emphasise that is what he's going to do in order to work for Reecey. I mean, it's not your fault you can't buy a dinner jacket. Okay, so as you just saw there, I used quick cuts of CCTV cameras and graffiti, and I really wanted to put them in because I wanted to convey that the area that Reecey and Joe live in is a down and out place, and it's forcing them to make money by doing illegal business. So in that respect, I want audiences to understand how Reecey and Joe have got to this point where they need to do illegal things to make money. Reecey's upbringing definitely wasn't a good one. I believe that he had no father figure, and I believe he was just raised by his mum. So I think that sort of sets the scene as to why Reecey is like he is. Whilst using the quick cuts of the CCTV cameras and the graffiti, I used the hard-hitting bass drum sound effect in between each cut, really making it obvious to the audience that this is the area that they are living in, really emphasising and making it a hard-hitting statement that this is why they're committing these crimes. It's not your fault you can't get a job. So in terms of my acting skills there for that final little bit, I wanted to make Joe feel guilty. As the character of Reecey, I wanted Joe to feel guilty. I wanted him to understand that the only way that he's going to get a job and earn money is by doing these crimes, so really blackmailing him into doing it. I gave the camera direct eye contact as if it was Joe, and I slammed the glass on the table to show that this is a hard-hitting point in the monologue. This is the point where Joe can either say yes or no, and Reecey wants a definite answer. I also used the prop of the pint by downing it at the end, and I also faded it out, and it just brings a definite ending to the monologue. Once we see the fade out and we see that the pint has been finished, we know that the monologue is over. So before I get to the evaluation, I just want to talk about quickly how I put my character together. So I use Katie Mitchell's methodology, and it's a list of facts and questions, and that helped me understand the character more. These include reading the whole play, Reecey's age, the location where he's from, what do we already know about the character, etc., the character biography, and altogether there's about 16 facts and questions that you need to sort of think about before you really dive into the depth of this character. I made sure to really emphasise my actions throughout this and believe that I was that character in that moment. I needed to believe that I am picturing what the dialogue is talking about in my mind. So, for example, when I talk about schools out, I needed to picture as the character that I was picturing a school and seeing a school in my head. So before I end this off, finally, I just want to talk about my evaluation of my performance. So out of the 5 takes I did for this monologue, this was definitely the best. It was my last take out of the 5 because I was limited on time, and I was happy with this. I felt I delivered the lines as I wanted them to be delivered, and I felt that my actions, my physical, my facial expressions really came across well to the audience. And it wasn't like my previous takes were bad, but I just didn't feel like I was delivering the lines as they were supposed to be delivered in my mind. So it makes sense as I went along the 5 takes, I perfected them as I went along, and the 5th one just happened to be the best. But thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed my monologue. I hope I gave a good evaluation, and this is something I have really enjoyed doing, so thank you.